Hello, Taylor Elwood here with the Men's Mysteries podcast, and I'm going to be bringing Andrew Carruthers on in just a few moments to talk about how to honor our yes. Andrew is a leadership and mentoring coach for businesses, for CEOs, and does a lot of really fascinating work. I'm super excited to have him on. And if you're a man that is watching the show, I also want to urge you to check out my book, Quest for the Mature Masculinity, which is an exploration of some of these very same themes. If you haven't gotten this book yet, you can get it on my website, you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on any online retailer, and it's also available on audiobook. So make sure you get it and get reading. All right, I'm going to bring Andrew on here in just a moment. My brother Andrew, welcome to the Men's Mysteries podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, who you serve in the world out there.
Thank you, Taylor. I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me on. So my name's Andrew Carruthers. I'm a coach. That's the simplest term I can use for it. I actually don't I love that term. I'd prefer to call myself a facilitator. But people would be like, well, what do you facilitate? What do you mean by that? Which I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing that they would ask more. But coach is the term that a lot of people recognize for the type of work that I do. Um, I started in the beauty industry way back in 1998. And the reason I shared that piece is that introduction was really what led me into everything that I'm doing at this point within my career because um, in 98, I started an apprenticeship with a guy in Salt Lake City. And he was the regional education director for this product company called TG. And because he didn't have a lot of people to work with there in the area, one of my first opportunities to get to step in front of people and facilitate and teach was right when I first started my apprenticeship. Because he needed someone to go out and teach these product knowledge classes where you just go into a salon and get to teach them, like, oh, this is the shampoo and this is what's in the shampoo. This is why you should use it. Um, but it was so amazing because even before I had a hair license and even before I was officially a hairdresser, I was already teaching, I was already facilitating. And that quickly led into positions of leaderships within some of the salons that I worked with, leadership positions within quite a few different companies within the industry. And that continued opportunity to step into that role of coach and mentor and leadership. So back in 2020, I kind of realized that my time with the hair industry was really starting to come to an end. And in 2021, I left my position with the company Sound Via and just completely focused on my coaching and facilitation company and um, called The Journeyist. I guess I should mention my company. Um, and that's kind of the very, very short version that there are thousands and thousands of twists and turns and ups and downs and diversions throughout that story.
I can appreciate that. We all have our own story. And one of the things that we had talked about off record here, but we're going to bring it in, is the concept of boundaries and being able to say yes to ourselves. And so I wanted to explore that with you because I think it's a really important topic in relationship to men's work, where we see a lot of nice guys who are abandoning themselves in order to get approval from other people. Yeah, me too. Uh, and in the process, that nobody's happy. Nobody's really happy. Like, oh, I'm trying to make this person happy, but really I'm not. And it's leading to mediocre sex. It's leading to bad relationships. It's leading to jobs that I don't like working at, things like that. So I think it's really kind of important to hone in on that. So, what does it mean to say yes? Let's just explore this first at a very top level tier. What does it mean to say yes in a broad sense of the term? And what are your thoughts around that?
Mm. It's a good question. I would say that in the broadest sense of the term, saying yes to something is opening myself to it. Um, and so once I say yes to something, it is, at least for me personally, it's also a commitment to it, some level of commitment to it. And very often in the past, the challenging layer to that is I was such a yes person that very often I was committing myself and opening myself up to things I shouldn't be part of. Maybe relationships that I should not have been a part of, workplace environments that I should not have been a part of. So I think that yes is a very powerful statement. Um, and to your point, that kind of nice guy syndrome, I think often puts us in a position that we recklessly use that word because it's like, oh, I want to please this person, or I don't want to be disincluded. So yeah, it's always a yes. That was actually something that we were taught at one of the first companies I worked for. Um, we were taught this thing that the answer is always yes, with the caveat of we have to figure out how. And at first I was like, oh, I like that because it's like, yeah, we can always figure it out. But then later on, I realized that that is part of what was killing us within that company. Everyone was taught to be this yes person, and no one felt empowered to say, no, I can't do that. I can't take one more thing on my plate. So, yeah, I think yes is a really powerful word, and we just have to be really conscious of what do we give our yes to?
Well, and I mean, I think this is interesting because we look at this like in workplace dynamics. What do we see a lot of times with companies where it's kind of like, oh, the expectation is yes.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at a job where, I worked on a really good team. We did so well that they decided that, well, first our manager decided to volunteer us to support yet another product because another team was underwater. And then the leadership, seeing that we were handling that really well, decided to volunteer us for yet another software product on top of what we were on top of supporting what was already a very complicated software in the first place. And it was fascinating to me to watch how people just kind of like resentfully said yes because they didn't feel like they had a choice. And it seems like this is something that plays itself out across all levels and tiers of a company where it's just like, yes, yes, yes. And what is the cost? Well, we don't care. We're going to try and get as much out of you as possible and give as little in return. But we still want you to say yes.
Absolutely. And I do think, since the focus of this podcast is around men's work, I think it's something that we are subconsciously drilled with from the time that we're very young. We're taught that, like, well, be a real man. You can handle it. If no one else can do it, step up. Like, be a real man. And so we were really kind of ingrained with that from little boys that we should just always be like the person that's like, yeah, bring it on. I can do it. Sure. And that very much carried into my life pretty late into life. I'm still learning this lesson.
Well, and I mean, I kind of think about like what's the impact of that, and what I see is a lot of people who are burned out. I certainly see it with a
Yes,
lot of men where they are burned out, they're unhappy, they aren't, and it shows up in every area of your life. If it's showing up in one area of your life, it's showing up in every area of your life, even if it seems like you have it together in another area of your life, because the cost is that it spills over to everything.
absolutely. Yeah, and one of the greatest lessons that I ever learned was actually from one of my first life coaches, and she was the first person that put this, and I'm sure that most of you that are listening have heard this at this point, but the power of your no. Like the power of your no is so incredible. And she was the first person that ever said this to me. This was probably like 2005, 2006-ish when I was experiencing a lot of burnout, like you said, Taylor. Um, and she finally was like, Andrew, there's a lot of power behind no. And it really was challenging for me to open up to that because of exactly what we've just talked about. Like I was always taught to be this yes person, that was the pinnacle of, being a great worker is you are a yes person. And so no one had actually told me that no can be a really powerful word. And she was able to guide my focus to when I say no to something, what it's doing is it gives more power to the places that the yes is. Because then I'm not, I like how Adam talked about it at the Sacred Sons weekend, leaky energy. Because when we say yes to things that aren't ours, now we have leaky energy. And an old mentor of mine, he would always say, we have a life force budget that we can spend. Each day we wake up and we have this vitality and life force budget that we can spend. And so we have to choose wisely where that life force budget goes to. And so if I have this quote leaky energy where that life force budget is going 10% into this tiny little project, 10% into this project, 10% into this relationship that is really draining and I shouldn't be a part of. Well, all of a sudden, now the people in our life that really matter, the parts of our work that we really should be pouring our heart and soul into, they're getting a fraction of us. And so she really helped me to shift that concept that no wasn't a shutdown of something, it wasn't a block, it was actually a redirection to keep my energy flowing into the places that deserved my energy.
Yeah. It what was fascinating for me with that job, and it kind of it goes again to the same thing that Adam talked about. So for people who are watching this too, Andrew and I met at Prime Leadership Sacred Sons, which was a an amazing experience to have together. And I think what it highlighted for me is like the importance of leading in my own life. One of the biggest decisions I made earlier this year was to leave that job, and it was for that very reason of they keep stacking work on me. They're not paying me anymore. They keep expecting me to say yes to things that I don't want to say yes to. It was to the point where it's like, oh yeah, we want you to be on call for Australia hours. So that means you're going to be working in the evening and you're going to work during the day. It's like, well, that's not I don't want to do that. Well, you signed the contract. You agreed to this. Okay, well, now I'm gonna walk away from this because that's not what I really want. And it was an interesting real it was interesting to realize like I have the power to say yes to myself. And yes, it may be leaving the security of something, but there's always other opportunities out there. And I think a large part of the reason why sometimes people say yes also is they say it from a fear of, well, if I don't say yes to this, then I'm gonna be out in the cold.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Taylor, because I think that like I coach a lot of leaders and this is really prevalent if they're kind of like C-suite leaders underneath like a pretty intense president or a pretty intense owner that they get into this place of just constant yes. And so when we ask the question, what would happen if you said no? What would actually happen if you were just like, no, I'm not going to take one more project on. No, not going to absorb one more department into my department. What would be the fear? The first thing that always comes up, of course, is this. It's the security aspect. Like, well, God, I mean, they could fire me. But then when we really start to dissect it, it's not actually the firing that's scary. It's the disconnection. It's that they have so much um, value placed into this position that they have that it's more about the fear of losing the value of the position, losing connection with that thing that has given them so much power and so much um, sense of value. And so it's almost not the loss of the job that's the scary thing for a lot of people that keeps them in this kind of yes process. And I think that that's a really valuable thing for us to ask ourselves if we find ourselves in a place that we do keep saying yes out of fear of what might happen when we say no. Really dig into that. Ask like, okay, well, what am I actually afraid of? Am I really afraid of, because for a lot of people it's not even necessarily the financial risk. It's like I can get another job, especially if it's not some like super super high level job. So it's worth asking ourselves, like, what am I actually afraid of? If I did stand up for myself and say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Because when we do that, there's a couple of things that could happen. We could actually set a new precedent within the company of no, you're not going to just take advantage of your teams. Or they could keep pushing until we somehow cave. Or they might say, okay, well, then get lost. And it's like, at that point, do I even really, kind of like in your situation, do I really even want to stay in a situation that continually abuses me and continually expects more and more with no return, with no reciprocation?
Yeah, it's really it's a really important point because it's very easy to get into a situation I find where I'm saying yes to everyone else and no to myself.
Mm,
And so fundamentally the deepest dissatisfaction is well, what am I'm abandoning myself. I'm saying no to myself in order to make everyone else happy around me. And the cost is that while in the short run that might work, in the long term it just leads to health issues. It leads to broken relationships. It leads to a lack of trust. Because how can I trust myself if I'm always abandoning myself? And I certainly can't trust other people then. And other people don't necessarily can't necessarily trust me either.
yes. I love how you put that. How can I trust myself if I keep abandoning myself? And I think that that's a great way to frame it because it actually puts the level of energy that's being expended there. Again, this kind of nice guy syndrome that is that, oh, well, we give up ourselves to be in service of others. And don't get me wrong, like there is a place and a time where it's like we do have to put ourselves aside for the greater good. Like there are those moments in time. That's different from trying to satisfy some maniac boss who just has no boundaries and wants to leech us dry for everything. And by continually saying yes to that person, you're right. We're basically saying no to ourselves, to our own needs, to our own health and wellness. In 2019, I took a position with the company that I was working for, this hairdressing company. And before I took this new position, I was the education director, which was very much where my voice belonged in the company. The person that was just above me in the company, which was a little bit more of like a corporate type of a position, he left the company, and I was like, "Hey, what do you guys think about me taking Dan's job?" And they were like, "Oh, we didn't think you'd be interested in that kind of position." And I was like, yeah, let me give it a try. This sounds pretty cool. Like, I want to give it a shot. I've never done this type of position. Well, next thing I know, I find myself at the table, the quote table, because it was all based on Zoom, um, in marketing meetings, in sales meetings, in numbers, dissection meetings. And I'm just like, oh God, like what have I gotten myself into? And within that position, there was a constant ask. It was just a constant, like, well, okay, well, can we add this? Oh, can we add 10 more YouTube videos to the feed a month? Can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And of course, because I just got a huge salary increase, paid insurance, that kind of stuff, I just felt obligated to say, yes, oh, yeah, yeah, I'll make that happen. Oh, yeah. And if I'm honest, there was a part of me too that was me trying to prove myself as something I wasn't. And so I put myself in a position that I was definitely saying no to myself personally. And also, I was giving my voice, which was such an essential piece of who I am and what I do. I was giving my voice to things that there was no business in me being part of those conversations. So, about halfway through 2019, and this is to your point of our health actually being sacrificed, I started to lose my voice. I would be in these meetings and it was really hard for me to speak up in the meetings anyway, because I was at a table with 4 or 5 very fast, reactive talkers. And I'm much more of the kind of person that likes to sit back, absorb it in, and take a few moments to think about these things. So it's already hard for me to speak up at these sessions anyway. And what I would find as this started to happen is I would go to talk, my voice would actually like shut down.
Yeah.
And it
Wow.
wasn't until just recently in that um, a couple years ago I hired a voice therapist because I had done a lot after that. I still struggle with it sometimes. But for a while after that, I couldn't figure out what was happening, and it's a defense mechanism within the body. For it's the false vocal folds, the vocal folds above the true vocal folds that make the sound. They shut down to protect us.
Mm.
And so it was a protection mechanism. And now I look back and I'm like, this was like higher self going, dude, shut the fuck up. Like you have no business being here. You have no business saying yes to these things. You have no business putting your voice into these rooms. Like, if you're not going to recognize this, we're going to take your health away. We're going to take away one of the most important things to you, your voice. And then also started to notice like I was having back pain constantly. I was having sciatica. Um, I was drinking too much to try to,
To numb it.
cover up and medicate. Yeah. And so to your point, this saying no to ourselves, it's not some innocent little thing, man. Like this literally kills people.
Well, I mean, we are you had a video actually the other day on Instagram about embodiment. You were kind of talking about it, and I mean this really kind of hits that point because yeah, the body will signal to you what it needs to say in order to get you to listen. So shutting down your voice, all those other things, it's like yeah, there's reasons that we're feeling what we're feeling. I think it's a really good indicator of like how am I taking care of myself because I can safely say that although I no longer have that steady pay as far as that job goes, I am a lot less stressed than I was too. I'm a lot less, unhappy. I'm much happier. I'm much more content, much more focused on what really matters. And I can see the same for you. So I think it is really important that we learn to listen to that inner knowing, which is expressed through the body. There is a body consciousness that's going to say, well, it's going to say, okay, if you're going to say no, then I'm going to say no to you.
Absolutely. And I think that I was really fortunate because so much of my work, for my personal work, pre in 2019, um, was about tuning into my body. A lot of my coaching background is embodiment coaching. It's speaking to the actual body. And so I was really fortunate that I didn't just shrug it off. But I could see a lot of people in my position, if they didn't have that connection to the body's wisdom, I could see them just kind of excusing it as like, oh, I'm just kind of having some trouble with my voice. Oh, and I went to doctors and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like I had scopes, in my throat and in my ears and all kinds of shit looking for what was happening. And every doctor I went to was like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like your vocal folds actually look fine. They're a little inflamed from you pushing because I would have to like really straighten and push to get words out. And so I was inflaming my folds, but they couldn't see shit wrong with me. And so, fortunately enough, I did have those practices of really tuning into body intelligence. And it was crystal clear about 7 or 8 months into 2019 that I couldn't keep doing this to myself. And it was really becoming clear that the voice was trying to tell me this isn't the place for you to speak. And so, fortunately, the company I was working for, Zambia, and they're wonderful humans. And I went to them and I just told them straight up, I was like, "This job's killing me, and it's not because you guys aren't treating me well. It's because it's not the right thing for me." And they allowed me to take a step back to my education director position, and I carried that through 2020. But it was interesting too, Taylor, because even through 2020, as I was teaching the voice stuff kept coming up, and by the end of 2020 I realized that The times that my voice was good was when I was in my coaching, and the times that my voice was bad is when I was teaching haircuts. And it's not like I hated teaching haircuts. I just didn't really care about hair anymore. And my voice was telling me like this isn't the place for you anymore. And so
It's
I'm
time to
I'm
move
super
on.
grateful that I was able to listen to that.
Yeah, it was time to move on and move into something bigger and bolder for yourself. And I mean, this kind of comes to the next topic, which is, learning to say yes to ourselves. So obviously your body kind of trained you toward that, but what were some other experiences that helped you to learn how to say yes to yourself and start saying no to other people?
I do have to give a lot of credit to my first coach, Lynn Christian.
Hmm.
Her company is called Soul Salt, and um, she really helped me to understand that saying, and again, like the memes are abundant around these things, but it's to actually understand that saying yes to myself was actually saying yes to other people too, because by saying yes to myself, I was going to have a higher caliber version of myself to be present with my wife, to be present with my coaching clients, to be present with the students that were in my classroom that I cared about. And so she really helped me to make that connection that, um, well, it was actually disconnecting the belief system that, this self work, the self development is somehow, quote, self-ish, or egotistical or self centered. So she really helped me to let go of that old paradigm that somehow by focusing on myself and developing myself, that was self centered, and move towards the capital T truth of the matter, which is by doing that work on myself, I was actually helping the whole world.
Hmm.
This is something that we hear a lot within the men's work too. It's like you becoming a better man is in service to this planet because this planet needs good men walking on it. And so it's not just about ourselves, it is a generative act across the board to say yes to ourselves, to prioritize ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's really the way I like to look at it is by doing my work to be a better man. I'm also doing the work to become a safer man for myself and for the other people around me because I'm not operating from that place of you know toxicity where I'm just like lashing out and reacting and not happy with my life. It's honoring that deepest yes to myself and as a result transforming the way I show up for other people because I can say, well, now I'm showing up for you fully and authentically instead of showing up for you reluctantly and resentfully.
Absolutely. And that's who the people that's the version of us that the people who want to be part of our lives, that's the version of us that they want. They don't want the burned out, constantly pissed off, short-tempered, volatile. um even again, coming back to the nice guy thing, people don't actually want you to be in the oh well, what do you want to do, honey? Like all of this stuff that we do thinking that we're being sweet or being kind or being nice. um I have a best friend, and um Josh and I have been best friends since we were 14 years old. And one of the things that was really challenging with the two of us as we grew up together, early on in my life, I was very, I had the nickname Demandy because I was very demanding. And so I was very blunt with people. I was very straight, kind of hard edged about like, well, this is the way things are, very black and white about the world. And Josh was a lot more like, he's kind of got the hippie soul, like the hippie punk rock soul. Like he's just like, yeah, man, cool, whatever. Like, and so you'd be like, well, where do you want to, I'd call him up and be like, hey, man, let's go get dinner somewhere. Okay, well, where do you want to go to dinner? I'm like, Josh, I asked you, dude, like, where do you want to go? You know me, I don't care, whatever. And it's like, in that moment, I wanted him to be the person that could just say, you know what I want, Andrew? I want a fucking hamburger, you know? Like I wanted him to be that person. So this kind of nice guy place that we play, it's not even the version of ourselves that other humans want to be around. We
Yeah.
think that it is. Well, it's not that we consciously think that it is. The subconscious has created a story, it's created an identity and an agreement that this is how we interact with people so that we get what we want, which is connection, potentially. So, yes, I fully love what you shared because it's so true. For me to show up as the man I want to be, for me to show up as a safe space for other human beings, I have to do the work for myself.
Yeah, I think there's also just something really empowering about saying I want X, Y, and Z. It doesn't mean that you're going to get it, but even just being able to voice it and say it is so much more powerful. And then it creates this juice, I think, between myself and another person. Like I had someone who said to me recently, like, I feel so safe with you because I know what you want. You're not trying to figure out what I want. You're not trying to do what you think will get you whatever. Instead, you're just being really clear about what you want. And as a result, it actually more often than not, I'm inclined to say yes because I know what you want and you're not playing a game. I'm like, yeah, well, why not? I mean, because I've spent too much of my life trying to be that nice guy, walking on eggshells. Oh, if I do this or I do that, it's gonna. Well, you know what? Maybe it will make someone unhappy. Maybe they will say no, and no isn't such a bad thing. That just means that they're honoring themselves, and I'm still honoring myself by being honest about my wants and whatever. If I can do that without being attached to an outcome, then I more often than not probably will get what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, um, I think sometimes the hard switch out of this nice guy phase, and let me pause there for a second because there might be a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Contradiction that you might be hearing. Because I said that when I was younger, I wasn't a nice guy. I was actually very direct. It was in my 20s that this actually started to happen. And it was because when I moved to Salt Lake City, I grew up back east, where
East Coast
bluntness
Edge.
is a lot it's a lot more accepted on the East Coast. That kind of like, hey, this is what's up, that's very accepted on the East Coast. So when I moved to Salt Lake City, which was in 97, um, for the first few years, I just kind of still had that East Coast edge to me, and I had this bluntness. But I did start to notice the toll it was taking on my relationships because it wasn't me being honest from a kind place. It was me being honest from kind of a harsh asshole place, honestly. And so what happened to me is my pendulum swung to the complete opposite side of the spectrum about, 2002, 2003, as I started to notice like, oh, I kind of quote get more of what I want when I'm super kind to people. It almost became a manipulation.
Super nice to people. I think there's a difference between niceness and kindness. We'll come back to that. But yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so super nice.
right. And exactly. And to your point, the niceness, it wasn't genuine. It wasn't kindness. It was covert. It was me trying to get something. It was me trying to influence people to be what I wanted them to be and to give me what I wanted. And so it took a long time to readjust that to a place that I did realize, oh, I can still say, this is what I would want. If it's up to me, here's what I want in a really kind and loving way. It doesn't have to go to this other extreme. And I think that that was the point I was trying to get to is I think that that's one of the blocks that we sometimes have on a subconscious level is the subconscious level. The subconscious just sees things very kind of blocky. And so it thinks, oh, well, if we stop being nice, then we have to become an asshole. We have to start, becoming the what do they call it? Oh my gosh, the something tyrant when it's your child.
Well, I mean, the inner tyrant, we'll call it that, or yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's
Yeah.
it's like the child tyrant,
The
basically,
child tyrant,
the man
right.
they put up on. And that's not what we're trying to say here. And like what the example that you gave, that you can just openly share, hey, this is what I want. And when you do it from the right heart, the other person will feel that they are also welcome to say, hmm, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm into that tonight.
Yeah.
Because they'll feel it is coming from a kind place. It's coming from the right heart.
Right. And that's the difference, because I mean, with kindness, there is no covertness. Whereas with niceness, there is. That's the covert contracts. Well, if I mow the lawn, if I take out the trash, if I clean the dishes, you'll have sex with me.
Yeah.
Without actually just saying, hey, I really want to have sex. And I'll get to that housework eventually, but I'd really like to have sex right now, or something like that. I mean, seriously, like how much better that is. It's like, oh, okay. Or okay, yeah, no, not right now, but but hey, if we get all the housework done, then yeah, and we wash up afterwards and go on then we can do that or something. Okay, cool. At least we've talked about it openly, and it's not a covert contract. It's not an expectation. It's something that has been brought out into the energy. And I use the example of sex because I think that that's like an area that pretty much any guy can relate to, right? It's like, oh yeah, I want to have sex with somebody. Okay, great. Well, if I want to have sex with somebody, then maybe just try speaking up for what you want. And also being comfortable with receiving the no, because it could just be not right now. It could be no period. And if it's no period, then hey, that person's doing you a favor. You're not wasting time on on something, and it doesn't have to be sex. It can be lots of different things. I mean, I think it can be just as real to say, hey, I want to get together and have a really good dinner and hang out and talk for a while, and that could be just as valid. But the point is that it's something where you can actually voice it and speak to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so much living that I think so many humans have. There's so much living within the unsaid spaces, and just these stories that get created in that silence. That's the stuff that ruins relationships. That's the stuff that um, ruins our own relationship with ourselves. Coming back to something that you said earlier, just having the trust with ourselves. Like if we constantly are living in this covert contract kind of world, unmet expectations kind of world, um, expecting things from other people when they have never heard that that's what we want from them, it ruins our trust with ourselves too, because we can't start to feel like we can get what we want. So it's it's a really tough one to Taylor. Like there's just so much shit that we were programmed with our entire lives. Um, and again, men have different versions of what we were taught, from a lot of women that were grown up, or those who are, um, undefined genders. Like we all have these different things that we've grown up with. And I think the most important part is to recognize that that is what the subconscious operates from. And that, unless we do the conscious work that you and I both have undertaken for ourselves, and I'm sure a lot of the brothers that are listening have probably undertaken for themselves, until we actually do the conscious work to become aware of, oh, okay, as a little boy, this was my common experience with other little boys. And so little boys in our world carry a lot of this type of belief system. When we get into that awareness with each other, especially within a group setting, shit can really change fast too. Like it doesn't have to take years and years and years. But and I used to hate saying this, But sometimes it does take the hard fucking work. Like I used to hate saying that it was hard work because I don't want it to feel like hard work. And maybe there's a way to just do it all with ease, but I haven't figured it out yet. Um, but sometimes it does take that really facing into the things that are challenging and the things that are hard to get to that place so that we can show up differently. So I can show up honestly, like you said, just like, hey baby, I want to have some sex tonight, instead of like, oh well, maybe if I'm a good boy, I can like pet her leg and see if she's interested, and like do the kind of nice guy bullshit that I used to do.
Yeah, and kind of test the waters and then like, oh, pull back because I gotta stay safe. Can't put myself out there because if I'm just honest that I need this, maybe she'll leave. I mean I kind of look at it this way, like and it's it's kind of fitting we bring this full circle back to the beginning here. It's the best question I think a person could ask themselves is what's the worst case scenario that could happen? Because if you can spell that out and just be like, okay, this is the worst case scenario that could happen, well then great. Now you know what the worst case scenario is, and chances are that you're not going to get that worst case scenario anyway.
Yeah. There's an old school Franklin Covey coaching technique that I still love and use really often today because you ask the client, okay, what is the worst possible thing that could happen if you say yes? Okay, here's the worst possible thing. And then you give it a number, 1 to 5. What's the probability that that will happen if you say yes to this? And then give it a number. Then you say, okay, what's the best case scenario that could happen if you say yes to this? And what's the likelihood that that will happen? Give it a 1 through 5. Then you go to the other side. You say, okay, let's look and see if you say no to this. What is the worst thing that could possibly happen? What's the likelihood? What's the best case scenario of you saying no to this? And what's the likelihood of that happening? And pretty quickly, people start to see, oh, yeah, that fear that I had of saying no to this, so unwarranted. All those big fears that the worst case scenario that I've started to map out. Could it happen? Maybe. Is it likely? Probably not. And even if it does, because the follow up question is, even if it does happen, what could you do to mitigate the pain that that would cause? And so once we start to really pull those things apart, yeah, it's like when we're honest about worst case scenario and is it even the worst thing that could happen if it really did happen? Very often the answer is not what we would expect.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I'm really thrilled that we got this opportunity, and I would invite you to leave us with one final word of wisdom that we can take with us moving into the day forward.
Hmm. I'm just going to go straight to the word acceptance because it's just such a hot word for me right now. I've got a couple clients even that I connected with this morning, and for some reason it was hot in their minds too. Just remember that acceptance is not approval of your experience. Acceptance is the full embrace that it is what it is right this moment. And so by doing that, we actually release ourselves from the control that those experiences have over us. This morning, I was in such a fucking frustrated mood, Taylor. Like it was like I was getting super pissed and like pissed at myself because I was feeling so much frustration. And so what I tried to do first is I tried to fix it. So I went out and I started my breathwork practice. I started my yoga practice. I was like, I did everything to try to cure my frustration. And it wasn't until we got home from our morning walk and I was still just like in this terrible mood. I was like, oh, you forgot to do the one thing that you always share with people about these challenging energies. You forgot to just fully accept it, to just sit with it and go, oh, yeah, I'm fucking frustrated. Something's happening for me right now. Feel into it. What does it feel like in my body? Can I just be present with it without making it right, wrong, good, bad? And so, yeah, acceptance. It is so freeing, and it gives us the opportunity to actually move through things in ways that we can't if we keep denying it and keep pushing it off.
Excellent. I love it. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Let go of the resistance and accept. All right. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. For people who are interested in learning more about Andrew, check out the show notes, and I will see you for another episode of the Men's Mysteries sometime soon. Thank you all for watching this episode with me and Andrew. And if you enjoyed this video and you're on YouTube, please like it, comment on it, subscribe. If you are on Substack, please restack it, heart it, give it a comment, share it with other people. That's how we get to share this and also create a safer world because of the work that we're doing. Thanks so much and have a great day.